Good evening. Great to have you with us as we wrap up the week. I'm Joe Donlin in tonight for Marnie. We begin with breaking news on the world stage. Dire warnings tonight from the president with a potential war in Eastern Europe now seeming closer than ever. President Biden telling Americans to get out of Ukraine now with a Russian invasion appearing imminent. The U.S. citing intelligence that the Russian military could make a move in the coming days, bringing new urgency to a standoff that has now lasted weeks. Let's go right to correspondent Kelly Meyer, live tonight at the White House with the latest for us. Kelly?
Joe, we know President Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin will be speaking tomorrow morning by phone. Senior administration officials telling NewsNation that Russia had proposed a call on Monday, but the U.S. pushed for tomorrow morning. The high-stakes call comes at a crucial point in the crisis. Today, the White House saying there is a credible prospect of a Russian attack. Tonight, a new warning from the White House.
Any American in Ukraine should leave as soon as possible.
The Biden administration telling Americans still in Ukraine to leave within the next 24 to 48 hours, signaling an escalation in the crisis the world has been watching.
There is a very distinct possibility that Russia will choose to act militarily, and there is reason to believe that that could happen on a reasonably swift time frame.
Today, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan telling reporters an attack could come before the end of the Olympics, which are set to finish on February 20th, pointing to Russia's position, massing troops around 3 borders with Ukraine and saying they're ready to mount a major military action any day now. Warning aerial bombings and missile attacks could mark the beginning of a Russian invasion, and that there could be a rapid assault on Kyiv, the capital city. President Biden leaving the White House, not stopping for reporters as he heads to Camp David for the weekend. His defense secretary ordering 3,000 more troops from Fort Bragg in North Carolina to Poland, a NATO ally bordering Ukraine, set to deploy in the coming days. Today, 1,000 U.S. service members arrived at a NATO base in nearby Romania. In an interview with NBC's Lester Holt, the president vowing these troops are there to support Eastern European allies and will not see combat against Russians.
What scenarios would you put American troops to rescue and get Americans out?
There's not. That's a world war. When Americans and Russians start shooting at one another, we're in a very different world than we've ever been in.
And Joe, today President Biden spoke with key European allies ahead of this call tomorrow with President Putin. But even with today's stark warnings, the White House still says they don't believe Putin has made up his mind on whether he'll invade. Joe?
Kelly, I just heard about this call late this afternoon. What more can you tell us about what's scheduled to happen tomorrow between the two presidents?
Well, first, it's a big deal that both sides agreed to this call. Putin was pushing for Monday, as we said, but the U.S. was able to convince him to speak tomorrow morning. The administration could be taking this as a hopeful sign that diplomacy can still be reached here. We know that is something the U.S. and allies have been pushing for this entire time. But we also know that Putin's demand that Ukraine not be admitted into the NATO alliance is a non-starter for the U.S. and allies. We can expect the president to press again the severe sanctions that will be imposed should Russia invade. And the president will present this unified front between NATO allies as they continue to beef up Eastern European allies as a way to deter Putin. But if past is prologue here, Joe, and what many presidents that have been through this building behind me have learned is that it is Russia's actions, not their words, that matter. So it's those days and hours after this call that we will be watching for, Joe.
So this was a serious warning, Kelly, and it got a lot of people's attention today about getting out of Ukraine. Do we know how many Americans are there right now, and if any of them have taken them up on this offer to get out?
Well, the short answer is the White House just doesn't know. They say when Americans move to another country, they don't always register with the embassy when they get there. And when I asked the State Department, they pointed to estimates they had from October that was pre-Russian military buildup, and that was around 6,600. But other reports have estimated as many as 30,000 Americans are believed to be in Ukraine. And Joe, 2 Americans we spoke to that are currently in Ukraine relocated from Kyiv, the capital, to western Ukraine, closer to the Polish border, saying they feel safe there and they don't want to leave the country completely. Joe?
All right, Kelly Meyer, thank you for the update tonight live in Washington, D.C. Let's get more on this now from retired Lieutenant General Richard Newton. He has 34 years experience in the U.S. military, leading thousands of men and women during times of crisis. General, it's good to see you. What do you think? Is this going to happen?
Well, good evening, Joe. By the way, Kelly's very concise report, I think, sums up what is really a very confusing situation and a very dynamic situation. I think it's the president's call tomorrow with Vladimir Putin will be absolutely key and maybe the most important call of his administration, frankly. But again, it's actions that speak to me, and those actions are that Putin has positioned 100,000 troops around the Ukraine border. He is conducting the largest military exercise we've seen since the Cold War. There's up to 30,000 additional Russian troops participating in that exercise in Belarus, and also there's maritime part of the exercise going on up in the sea there. So that's a huge challenge, and so his actions speak. The final point I would raise is that Putin only understands power. And he is operating from a position of power. He holds all the cards in this case. Now, he's concocted this situation himself, but he has an agenda here. My sources and really my own mindset right now is I don't believe he'll attack, at least imminent attack at this point. He doesn't, frankly, need to. He's garnered a lot of things that he's already accomplished to date. But nonetheless, actions speak, and he's postured to attack, and that really has to have our very, very close attention.
I felt the same way, General. The longer this went on, the more I felt like he was bluffing. But this warning today feels different. It feels more imminent and more serious. Is there something, do you think, that led to this? Maybe satellite imagery or logistics?
Well, we have exquisite intelligence in the European theater. Point one. Point two is there are Americans in harm's way, as Kelly indicated, 6,600 American citizens, and the 30,000 she referred to may also be additional what we call dual citizens there, and so forth. And so I think Americans potentially could be in harm's way, obviously with 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border, certainly. But if Putin decides to attack, it'll be a bloody mess if he does. And I believe that it does not serve his purposes both internationally and certainly on the European continent, but also domestically as well. Secondly, I believe it would be an economic nightmare for him to do that, get bogged down in Ukraine, much like the Soviet Union was bogged down in Afghanistan, a couple of decades or so ago. So, but again, actions speak, and so we have to pay very close attention to this situation that Putin has concocted.
How do you think it would most likely go down, General?
Well, indications are that what I would expect from if there was a Russian invasion, Joe, first off, you're going to see a massive cyber attack. And the massive cyber attack would be inside of Ukraine, which would then really try to cut off the eyes and ears of the Ukrainian military, but also the Ukrainian government. And so that's what I would expect. Then I would expect also those 100,000 troops that are on the border. I would expect them to attack in a rather violent fashion, both with on the ground, but also with some air attacks as well. And then I think you'll see, how far he decides to go in. I think the Ukrainian, again, the reaction to that would be bloody as well. The Ukrainians, they don't necessarily, again, they're not formidable enough to, defeat the Russian army, but in a sense, they would be very strong in their defense. And also, they're defending their homeland. Right. And so I think that's how it would go down. But again, the first indication will be, a sporadic, but then a massive cyber attack, in my view.
If his strategic goal is keeping Ukraine out of NATO, the path to that sort of closes if Russia is involved here. So he can accomplish what he wants with sort of a limited invasion, if you will, from southeast into the southeast part of Ukraine. Maybe you would still have at least to secure some land access to Crimea. And if you don't go into Kyiv, which gets messy, as you point out, he accomplishes his goal, getting the conversation stopped on NATO and maybe limiting the Western response as well. What do you think of that theory?
Yeah, that's a good point, Joe. Remember, and you brought this up, Putin has already attacked Ukraine with the annexation of Crimea back in 2014. If I was advising the president, I try to, as an advisor to the president, I want to look through the eyes of the enemy, in this case, through the eyes of the adversary. That would be through Putin. What's to his advantage? Is his advantage to actually attack and try to gain, foothold and ground inside of Ukraine? Or has he already accomplished that, where he has really put a little bit of an unbalance, or kept the United States and NATO off balance in this case? Diplomatic efforts have not been successful up to this point. We saw President Macron from France try to engage him on Monday, and that didn't work. And so, again, Putin holds all the cards here. And what he's trying to accomplish, he's trying to do just that. keep the U.S.-led NATO off balance, create a wedge inside of NATO, especially with Germany, because Germany is at issue here because they're the ones that need the natural gas through the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and so forth. And so that's key and fundamental. And then the third one is the fact that Putin wants to show that he is, again, a player on the world stage. Remember, he's in partnership with China, but he's also in competition with China. And recently, the United States have made a great point, of trying to pivot away from the Mideast and so forth to be more focused on a rising China. And Putin is saying, look, like I'm here in Europe, I hold a lot of cards here. It's consequential that you not, pay attention to what's happening here in the European continent. And if I have any hints at all, or any sense at all of weakness or daylight between your focus on not in Europe, I'm going to take advantage of that. And so that's the piece we really need to put. So, not only is he making a tactical or operational focus on Ukraine, but he's also playing the long ball here of trying to create a stronger role in play for Russia to keep Ukraine out of NATO, and at some point, either through military means or other means, is perhaps try to get Ukraine back into Russia at almost any cost.
All right, we're up against the clock here, General. I asked you in the beginning, and I don't know that I got a specific answer, so I'll ask you again on the way out. In your gut, is he going in?
My gut says he will not attack. My gut says he's already gained a lot of the high ground that he's wanted, and that he'll play this out as long as he can for the purpose of, again, compelling, as you said earlier in the conversation, of Ukraine ever even considering trying to go back to go into NATO.
Yeah. Lieutenant General Richard Newton, on a Friday night, we appreciate you spending some time with us and providing your insight. Thank you, sir. Have a good weekend.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.